Hey everyone, in this video I'm going to tell you why I would not buy a Porsche base 986 Boxster. I'm going to take a little bit of time going through the car visually, talking about the storage, the interior, some of the things I love and I don't love. But then we're going to get to the part that all of you want to see. I'm going to get in the car, we're going to go down the road, I'm going to talk about its driving dynamics, I'm going to talk about the handling, the motor responsiveness, and 25 years later, what does this car get right and what does this car get wrong? And at the end of this video, I'm going to explain who I think the right person might be for this car, and it might even be you. Welcome to 11 After 9, my honest, down-to-earth YouTube channel where I take a look at cars that I've always wanted, where I take a deep dive into some of the Porsche cars that you might be thinking about buying. So let's start with a quick walk around. I personally think that the 986 is really starting to come into its own visually. I think I might kind of describe this car as of its time, and I think of its time is really kind of coming back around. Along with low-rise jeans and grunge, I think that the 996 and 986 styling is really kind of coming back into vogue. And when we looked at that car originally and thought, God, it is so ugly, well, now it's really kind of organic, and the smooth, sloping lines really do flow into each other nicely, and I actually think that the headlights might also be coming back into vogue. Car's small, it's low, it's simple. There's nothing extra on it. All the proportions work. This Boxster really is an attractive car. The black paint looks great for its age. The panel gaps are tight, the doors shut with that old Porsche sound, and the car feels narrow compared to anything sold today, and I think that's part of the charm. So regarding interior colors, everyone has their preference, and this car has a gray interior, which honestly is not my favorite. I kind of think that in these 996, 986 cars, the gray just makes everything look a little flat and a little bit dirty, even when the leather's perfectly clean. I also kind of think that it's just this big swath of gray that really takes away a lot of the interesting accoutrements of the dash, and everything just kind of blends together into one kind of gray blob. But if you look past the color, I have to say that the design itself has actually aged a lot better than people think. You know, you still have that big central tack, the controls are really simple, and at the end of the day, there's no screens. And that stands out immediately because there's nothing to do in this car except look through the windshield and drive it. And it's just you in the car. And that's just so nice in today's world where you have to push 12 buttons to shut off ADAS or stop start or whatever before you even get driving in a car. And you're setting your Waze and you're setting your cruise control and you're setting it's just too much. And this car is just so simple and the interior reflects that. I will say that, of course, going back to this generation of cost cutting in Porsche, the quality of the materials, yeah, it's not great. I mean, the leather is a little bit hard and kind of shiny. The plastic, I mean, let's face it, the plastic's cheap on the inside of these cars. And I mean, that's reflected in the overall price, right? But I do think that if you can look past the sticky buttons, those are small things. And if everything works as it should, even 20, 25 years later, well then Porsche did its job. Of course, storage is still great for a small roadster like this. You get a front trunk and a rear trunk. Both are deep enough for weekend bags. The front trunk is actually surprisingly deep, like all Boxsters and Caymans. And it's practical in a lot of ways that Miatas aren't, because those are going to be the natural comparisons that people draw between the Boxster and its competition. But listen, at the end of the day, practicality is not why we're here. And so let's jump in the car and drive it. I want to talk about some of my first impressions. When you first pull away, you feel the age of the controls immediately. The steering it's hydraulic, but at low speeds it feels a little bit heavy and slow, and there's this rubbery deadness around the center. When you turn the wheel, the car takes a moment to respond. You know, sometimes I find myself having to be careful about describing the driving dynamics of any given model because the quality and the maintenance of the model that I'm actually driving might color kind of my overall thoughts. But I do think that the steering is very of its time in the early 2000s and the late 1990s. When you're going slow, while the steering, you know, is assisted, it certainly doesn't feel light and nimble on its feet. The shifter is the same story. Long throws, a little bit vague. It's not sloppy, but it's kind of rubbery. It definitely reminds me a little bit of my 993 that I had back in the day in the way the linkage feels. You don't get crisp mechanical feedback. You get a little bit of a softened version of it. It's not 356 vague, where you throw the shifter into whatever you hope the gear is as you're going down the road. It is sure-footed, but certainly not clickety-clack. Sitting behind your head is a 2.7 liter flat six motor putting out about 225 horsepower, roughly 192 pound-feet of torque, and frankly the engine is where things change, and I wouldn't say for the better. Normally anything over 200 horse is a peppy little car, and certainly this car can be described as that. I mean, it's by no means fast, but it's really the characteristic of the motor that I just wasn't a huge fan of. The motor, it's almost too smooth. It's too quiet. It's polite. It's very calm. There's no real vibration through the seat or the shifter. There's no pulses through the steering wheel. It doesn't matter if you're at 3,000 RPM or 6,000 RPM. It all kind of feels the same. And that kind of bugged me because I had to keep checking the tach because I couldn't feel where the engine was in the rev range. This car has a stock exhaust on it, and it was so quiet that feeling I get from every other 911 or most other Boxsters of you can shift from the seat of your pants and you know what the engine's doing and you know you can shift without ever looking off the road. I don't really have that with this car. Frankly, I was worried about over-revving it because it is a free-revving motor and you have to flog it to get going and you have to make that car live up above 5,000 RPM to try to extract as much of the performance as you possibly can, but I was really worried about over-revving it. And I didn't find that was normal in a Porsche. Like I said, every Porsche I've owned, including my 981 base Boxster, it gives me that sense of the motor at all times. You know, in contrast, my 981 feels alive. There's texture, there's this granularity to the car. You can feel the engine working and you can shift but completely by feel. The 986 base, it just doesn't do that. On a 1 to 10 excitement scale on back roads in New Hampshire, my 981 is a 7 or an 8, and this I really could say is probably a 2 or a 3. And with that stock exhaust, the sound is just so quiet. There's no drama, there's no howl, there's no I'm in a Porsche moment. Sure, you can hear it growl behind you and the actual motor sounds do emanate from the engine cowl, but this car would do very well with a Fister exhaust to really let that engine breathe and so you can really hear what the car is doing. To put a final point or an analogy on what I mean by the motor feel, it reminded me a lot as I was driving of sandpaper. My 981 base Boxster was a 100 or a 300 grit. If you dragged your fingers across it, you could feel every bit of texture, and it really tells you what the sandpaper's about. This car was much more like a 3000 grit, where you drag your fingers across and it really gives you no feedback, and you can't pick up the information you're looking for. And if you don't have the information, you're having less fun. So talking about the motor, let's talk a little bit about the power band and kind of how the gearing is set up. All the usable power in this car lives above 4,500 RPM. There's no doubt about it. And when you're there, the engine wakes up a little. You have a sense of urgency, you get movement, but you find yourself constantly hunting back and forth to try to get some momentum. And while most people will say, well, that's the point of having a manual car is to shift back and forth, I almost felt like I was pushing second too hard and lugging third too much. And it didn't make for an enjoyable drive. So you're constantly bouncing between a gear that's too short and a gear that dumps you out of the fun, and it's a weird dance. You're always planning your shifts and you're always thinking ahead. And while that sounds like it's engaging, sometimes it gets a little frustrating when you're on back roads, very curvy roads, and you're trying to keep some momentum in what is otherwise kind of a slow car. So this isn't a case in the modern Porsches. I mean, my 981 base has more than enough power and it has longer gearing, so you can actually stay in the meat of the power band. The 986 base never lets you settle into a rhythm. People complain about the newer Boxsters having too long of gears, and I completely know where people are coming from with that, because you can just stay in second or third gear sometimes and you're not constantly shifting, but it's the torque that's really limiting the seat of the pants fun. So let's talk about what this car gets right, and that falls solely on the handling and the suspension. So I borrowed this 2003 Boxster from my friend, and he had a local shop upgrade the suspension. It doesn't have an adjustable suspension, but it's a very compliant, very sport-oriented system. And with the upgraded suspension, the chassis is tight. It's not wallowy at all. It's not sloppy. There's slight body roll, but it's the good kind. It's the kind that lets you feel the weight transfer and trust the tires. It's very comfortable over bumps, it's predictable in corners, and it's genuinely capable. You have this feeling that as long as you're in the power band and you're really throttling this car, you can hang with higher horsepower cars on these tight back roads because you're carrying the speed instead of making it. This is a fun car on the right road, but the chassis deserves a better motor. In New Hampshire, this is an $8,000 to $9,000 car, which is amazing for a Porsche. But don't mistake cheap purchase price for cheap ownership. You can still buy the car for $9,000 and then quickly spend $15,000 if things pop up and you have to put major repairs into it. So who is this car for? I would say that this base 986 Boxster is perfect for the very entry-level Porsche buyer, the younger buyer. Someone who wants their first Porsche, someone who's okay with some wrenching, someone who wants balance and handling more than straight line speed. This reminds me of my 944 that I purchased in the early 2000s when I was looking for my first Porsche. It's a low horsepower car, it's a momentum car, and it's perfect for someone who wants to get into the brand at the lowest possible entry point. This car is not for someone who loves torque. It's not for someone who wants to revel in the Porsche sound. This is not for anyone coming from a modern performance car. They will not be impressed. If you're cross-shopping a Miata and you're going to track the car, buy the Miata. If you want a Porsche experience under 10 grand, then the 986 gives that to you. So here's where I land. You can have fun in the base 986 Boxster, but you have to work for it. You have to drive it hard. You have to keep the revs high. You have to commit. The chassis is really, really good, and the balance is good. The value is great, but the engine holds the car back. It's too smooth, it's too quiet, it's too slow, and the gearing never lets you settle into the power it does have. And that's why I wouldn't recommend buying a base 986 Boxster. If you want the 986 experience that people rave about, the one with excitement, mid-range drum and sound, you're gonna need the S. The S gives the 986 the engine it deserved from day one. For $8,000 or $9,000, the base is a great cheap Porsche, but the S is the one that actually feels like a Porsche should. And if you look on the used market, they're really only $1,000 to $3,000 more. Very, very much worth the price. And that's my quick review of the Porsche base 986 Boxster. I want to thank my friend for letting me borrow it, and I want to thank all of you for watching 11 After 9, where I try to give you folks an honest deep dive into these cars to see if it's something you want in your garage someday. Please let me know what you think if you own this car down in the comments, or if you own any Boxster, why did you go in that direction rather than jumping in the 986 versions? And I'll look forward to seeing you all next time.